This is Marna Weston for the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program on July 14th, 2023. We are in Marvell, Arkansas, and we have the distinct pleasure of meeting the exquisite, honored, extremely well-known, and to known for our audience more, Annie, Ruth, Zachary Pike. With me today is Donovan Carter as videographer, and
Avery Goodman.
And
Gabrielle Hurd.
It is our distinct pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you very much for consenting to the interview, Ms. Pike.
Your kindness shall never be forgotten.
Thank you, I'm honored. We'd like to just talk to you today. Your life is has been so celebrated and has so many achievements, we could not possibly hope to cover all of them today. Okay. But we'd like to start with some biographical information. Would you please first state your full name and also tell us when and where you were born?
My full name is Annie Ruth Davidson, Zachary Pike. I was born in Phillips County, and I'm not ashamed to tell you that I was born in a farmhouse, and even it wasn't acceptable then for black doctors, but a black doctor delivered me to my mother, and his name was Dr. Lawrence Davis of Phillips County, and he made his own medicine. And he granted my mother, and I was a nice child.
Well, that is awesome. I wish I could know the name of the doctor that delivered me. Thank you for your outstanding memory and for adding that to our interview. We really appreciate that. What is the date of your birth?
May. I have two dates.
You have two dates, okay.
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
May 12th, 1931. Now let me tell you why I have two dates. My people lived on a dirt road. My daddy was the foreman for this black doctor. And so the doctor didn't know when my mother would get in labor with me. So he rode his horse down to my dad's house and tied the horse up to a cedar tree. And I guess he was going to spend the night, I really don't know, but he brought all of his apparatuses for birth. This was in May. He didn't get my papers okayed until it got warm and he could ride out and go to the county. So he didn't go to the county until December. Now, May to December. I really can't tell you what he did for documentation, but he wrote down that he had just delivered a girl, a baby girl, no, a baby boy. And her people gave him the name, but he wrote it down and he forgot it. So he named me Ruthie Annie, born on May 10th, and it was May 12th. So when I started working at the school and found out that I had to get notification and get them straightened out, they told me that I had two birthdays. So I said, well, which one would my check come in first from? They said, well, I tell you what, when they interview you, say, you just tell them you Annie and you female, you're not no male. And I had always worked in the school system, and it said that I had never had a job, And I had chopped cotton, had picked cotton and picked ducks and geese, and my mother made feathers, bed feathers and all those things. But I didn't get any money for that now. And so I said, well, I tell you what, I will write that down. For 2 or 3 years, I wrote down Annie, Zachary, Pike, May 10th and 12th. They said, no, we can't put that on no paper. Excuse me for the expression. I said, I don't give a hoot. I didn't say hoot now, but I'm not going to say a bad word. What you put down, just send me my check.
It's wonderful. Well, what a colorful story, and what an interesting anecdote to have 2 separate birthdays. I'm sure that has caused you lots of shenanigans when you deal with the state and with papers over the years. Would you please tell your mother and father's names?
My mother and father's name?
Yes, please.
My father's name was Fidel, with a C, Davidson, Davidson.
And where was he from?
He was from Louisiana. And my mother was Carrie Mary Glenn before she married him.
Where was she from?
She was from Phillips County. And my father was my mother's second husband.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to take a sip of water?
No.
Okay. How?
And
Please.
she was his second wife. And my mother's first husband died from a heart attack. And she had given birth to 8 children with a midwife. And when she married my daddy, I think she was in her late 30s. 5 years later, I was born. And that's when this Dr. Lawrence A. Davis waited on my mother, and he said she had a perfect body. So don't tell me I'm not against midwives. They may have some that have messed up, but we as blacks and as poor blacks were fortunate to say we were delivered by a midwife.
Yes, in
And
fact,
we are living.
yes.
And we have good teeth.
Yes.
We're not drinking no goat milk, or we're not drinking nothing out of no can, because you woke up to your mom and pulled her dress up and went up in there with a bosom and got your titty. Some good, well, healthy people. And now, I will say, this latter generation, they haven't been reared right. They weren't carried right. They haven't been taught right. And they're weak. But we also, in conjunction with what the Bible said, it said the latter generation would be young, they would be hard-headed, and they would not live long lives.
So being the 9th child of your mother, can you tell us a little bit about your brothers and sisters?
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind mentioning them from oldest to youngest, please.
My mother's first child died of a fever, and he was 6 years old.
What was his name?
Booker T. Washington.
Oh, what an illustrious name.
Her second child was Althea, a girl.
Althea.
Third child was Mercial T. All of them was Washingtons. My mother didn't have any, and I'm not condemning parents to have kids by different fathers. It's best that you would, but if you fall in the line of what some of the parents are experimenting today, you'd kind of look around before you name your baby and before you have sex with a man. Hello.
That would be ideal.
A name is very important.
And the next of your siblings? The next of your siblings?
Flossie T.
Flossie T.
All the children were Washingtons. The next was a brother. He died. He was killed by a tornado in '52. His name was V. Otis Ward Washington.
V. Otis.
V. Otis. Okay. He followed him was Ellis Washington, and he was a minister. And the next two were girls. That was Flossie and Mary.
There were two Flossies?
No, that was next. I'm sorry, next was Mary, and the next one was Odessa.
Odessa.
Now, what else you want to know?
Well, because of your longevity and the opportunity to ask these questions, most people only know their family back to their grandparents. So I'm hoping you could tell me a little bit about your grandparents, and if you know great-grandparents, to also speak of them. So who were your grandparents?
My grandmother was named Amaryllis. It was named after the Christmas plant, Amaryllis.
Amaryllis, that's beautiful. Now, is that on your mother's side or your dad's side?
That's my mother.
Your mother's mother.
I never knew her.
Okay.
My mother was reared by two grandmothers. Her mother died, she said, when she was 8 years old. And so those two grandmothers reared her and another child. And that other child's name was Mary. And so my mother named one of her girls Mary. Okay, now what else did you want to know?
Your grandfather on your mother's side?
His name was Giles Wilkes. And our cemetery is named after him. And we have one of the most beautiful cemeteries, she can tell you, in the United States. And I work with them on that. And we just had a cemetery program last Sunday. We celebrated our 54th year. We have about 12 soldiers is buried out there. Our soldiers have maps and we have plaques, and we have very few graves without being honored.
That's a blessing. Where was Giles Wilkes from? How did he?
Giles Wilkes?
Yes, your grandfather.
He was from Phillips County.
From Phillips County as well.
And my mother was from Phillips County.
Now, how about on your dad's side? Who were your grandparents?
My dad's side, the only elder person that I knew from my dad's side was he had a sister, and they named me after her. Her name was Annie, and they named me Annie Ruth, and I'm named after Ruth in the Bible, and my aunt. And my dad always said that his daddy married a lady, and he was reared by a stepmother.
Back to your mother's side, do you know who your grandparents' parents were? Does your knowledge go back that far?
I have pictures of them, but they all were farmers, and my mother told me that we have a piece of land in our family, and when our grandfather realized that he had 4 nieces, he deeded 20 acres of ground to each one of those girls and said that when they became grown, he wanted that name Glenn, and practically everything I have in secret in my house is Glenn. I respect that man for saying he wanted Glenn's name to stay in the family, so I have my puppy's name Glenn.
So who was Glenn? Where does that name come from?
That was her granddaddy.
Her granddaddy.
And my mother said that this girl that was reared with her, her mother died too. So the 2 girls that was reared by these 2 grandmothers, one was light and one was dark. And my mother said these 2 women, one of them was dark and one was light. And she said that she always noticed this, one of the grandmothers would whip her all the time, and she wouldn't whip the other girl. And my mother said, she asked her, said, well, why do you beat me all the time and make me wait on her? Because she light-skinned. So she said, well, what? Said, you just beat me because I'm black and my hair is nappy? Yeah, I'm gonna whoop you for asking me that too. You trying to start some mess here, little old gal. My mother said she kept that up. And say one day she whooped her so bad, said she had scars. And said she went and asked her again. Said, why are you whooping me? I didn't do anything. And said this other girl's nickname was Sister. She said, well, I whoop Sister when I get ready. So Mama said, she said, I'm sure gonna get away from her just as quick as I can. My mother married at 15. And my mother said that one night, she said she and her, this girl, she called her sister, but it was a cousin. My mother said she heard her just down. She said, oh, Lordy. And he said, no, Lord, dear Lordy, dear Lordy, have mercy, Lordy. Mama said she got a little closer to the door. Lord, 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 deliver me, Lord, from all sin, evil, and a nigger. That was the bright one. That's the poem.
Oh, who's the poem by? Who wrote the poem?
Huh?
You said it was a poem, I was saying.
No, that was a prayer. She was on her knees praying.
A prayer.
Lord, Lord. And you know how we have our cemetery program. The minister from First Baptist in Little Rock, Ralph and Mary's minister, came down to our program, and they asked me what could I remember about my grandmother, and I told them I remember that poem that she said. And she had another one, a mule, a plow, a hoe and a sow, 24 hens and a rooster, and you'll live better than you used to.
You've described a family history where you've only talked about land ownership and money being transferred generationally to others, which is just a blessing. Do you know anything of the history of your family that might go back to slavery, or were you always from a free family?
No, I wasn't always from. My mother said that. I have pictures of my great-great-grandmother, those are two that I'm telling you about. Guess what they have on? They have on long white evening gown. They have on, and they had to use the white ladies' shoes, so those white men had to give them, the husbands had to give them their ladies. And I have two little boys standing beside these two men. These boys have on tuxedos and boots. Now, where did these kids way back there get these beautiful clothes from? And I don't understand. And now I have the pictures at my house, and these pictures are still good. These two old ladies look like they may be white-haired. One has good hair, and one has nappy hair. But they stayed together, and they both have graves at my cemetery, and I decorate those graves once a year.
Well, that's a very interesting mystery. I would love to be able to find out as well. How did they get these clothes that were so bedazzled and spectacular? It'd be wonderful to know. What is your first memory of school? Where were you first educated?
Oh, Trenton Elementary School at Trenton, Arkansas in Phillips County.
Do you remember the principal?
Yes.
What was the principal's name?
Ulysses Cartwright.
Ulysses Cartwright. And who was your first teacher?
My first teacher was Alma Connor. And this was a two-room school.
That's what I was going to ask you. So first and fourth grade, and then fifth and eighth?
We had a pot-bellied heater for heat, and we had an outdoors toilet for boys and girls. And the state furnished food for the kids in the school, and this was a rural school. And so they would furnish peanut butter, bananas, raisins, and things like that. And our drink was grape juice.
How long did you go to that school? How long did you go to that school?
I was at the school until 7th grade.
Until 7th grade.
And I was always another lady, and she's still living. She and I was, from the time that we started the school until I finished, we were both in the same class, and the principal he identified us as his smart gals. And at that time, the principal would have spelling bees at other schools, and he would always carry Osie and I. Osie lives. She was at my program Sunday. She's very weak now.
What is OC's full name?
Osie Robinson.
OC Robinson, and you're still friends today?
We're still friends today, and we love one another.
That's wonderful. I'd like to talk a little bit more about school, but first I'd like to find out about your chores. When you were growing up, what kind of chores did you have to do in your family?
Now, something I didn't interject when I was telling you about my father and my mother. I never lived on a white man's place. My daddy he said his people were Indians. And he was very, very literate when it came down to anything. He could take a piece of wood and make a man out of it, and make a fish out of it, and all those things. And I couldn't tell you where he learned all of these skills from, but he was a janitor, he was a mailman, and he could make anything that you could name, and you could just stand in front of him and he would draw it. And so he was hired by most of the plantation owners to take care of their animals and take care of the fowl. And so we always lived in the big house. I never lived in a shotgun house. And so Daddy had, I would say, he had opportunities that the average black man didn't have at that time. I might call it wrong, but you know what I'm talking about. Anytime you had anything male on your family, my daddy would go and castrate them. He got money from that. Sometimes he would have a 5-gallon bucket of what you call them. Now I know what we would call them.
Well, I guess if you eat them and sell them, there'd be sweetmeats, but otherwise they'd be, if you ate them, they'd be sweetmeats. Sweetmeats, but if you just cut them off, that's testicles, right?
Oysters.
Or mountain oysters is another thing you call them.
What is it?
Mountain oysters. Sweet breads and mountain oysters.
Okay.
But you're talking about the testicles.
My daddy filed soles. I don't know where he got that skill from. At our house, we had a front porch, and we had a swing on that porch, and we had rafters up there, and Daddy would file saws from people from Mississippi, Tennessee, and at that time, the best living that the blacks had, as well as the whites, was wood. And so Daddy had a job always, year-around, filing saws. And it was at this time that I believe I gathered some skills that maybe I have now, because at school, you were allowed to break a piece of crayon. That was just like slapping somebody. But my daddy had a box of crayons, and he would write everybody's name on that saw, and he would put it up there where when you walked up on the porch, you could read his name. He kept our porch full of saws, and we got a chance to meet people that I had never thought about. But they said that the test on a saw, let me ask you, and you, what is the test on the teeth that you know that this saw will cut before you pay him for it? Do you know what the test is?
No, ma'am.
Okay, Daddy had a cross-cut rack for the long saw. He had another one for a hand saw, and he had another one for a little saw that cut small pieces. Daddy could build anything. I have some things in my house now he built. And the test is, you put the saw in the rack. That's when the men would come to pick up their saws. you put it in, wouldn't pay him until they put it in the rack. And he had a thing, you screw, what is that thing you screw and hold something together?
Vice.
A bolt?
Huh?
Vice.
He said vice.
He said vice.
Vice, yes.
Vice.
Okay.
Daddy would put this salt in this vice, and no matter how it was made, he'd strike a match and put it back here at the handle, and that match would go on off and fall off on the ground. That meant the teeth was all even. And Daddy would get his pay.
Did
Now,
you develop any of these skills that your dad have? Do you with making animals or with? Do you have any of these skills yourself? Did any of these get passed down to you?
No, my son has them though.
Okay.
And I'm really good. My mother crocheted, and I forgot to tell you that back in those days, we had the government set educated black people to the communities to educate your black children. So we had home demonstration club people, home demonstration men and women to come into the courthouse, and the courthouse would handle them. You remember that? Okay.
We had something like that when I was in school. We still had home economics where you had to be able to cook and you had to learn a little bit about sewing, but I know they don't do that with the students now.
I guess that's why you girls don't know how to be a wife.
Yes, ma'am. So,
Well, I'm not saying that low rated. If we hadn't had them, I wouldn't be where I am and she would be where she is. We learned things from those people. They would have days. We learned cooking. They would have days. You learn how to set a hen and you come up with some chickens. And the boys would learn the male part. And so at school, these people would come in, I believe, about once or twice a month. And that's when we would have open house. All the children, they tell us, they'll be here tomorrow. Y'all dress up now and become real good now. Don't come out here stinking.
So you believe that home economics and demonstration was a very valuable educational tool?
I learned how to cook biscuits. I learned how to make a tick. Did you learn that? Sleep on a tick.
Well, maybe we
didn't
can.
have those. We didn't have cotton. We had grass and feathers. And the ladies learned that. And my mother learned how to cut cloth. She made most of our dresses. My mother could cut out you a pair of pants, and I bet you could wear them.
My mother did that too. She always
And
kept
quilted.
her patterns. Yes.
Quilted.
What do you like about quilting?
Oh, I have homemade quilts, and I have all kind of crochet work. It is my desire that I am 92, and I realize that I realize my age, but I really plan, and I want you to work on this for me. I want to have a booth when you all finish your museum. I have old pianos, I have old typewriters, I have my mother's old shoes, I have my daddy's suspenders, and any kind of crochet you want. I have crocheted bedspread, I have crocheted dress, and all the doilies, I have over 100. And I really want to have a booth at the museum and demonstrate to blacks some legacies.
Did you learn business typing? Is that why you have the typewriters? You learned how to
No,
type?
we did not have a typewriter, but you had to learn skills with your hand, and you had to write, and you had to learn math. And right now, I can put my math up against anybody's computer.
I'm sure you can. Do you play the piano or any instruments? I know you said you sing, so your voice is an instrument.
My mother gave the sisters that was older than me, and sometimes I might think about charging her up with that, but she didn't know any better. She gave the older girls music, and she just said she'd teach me something else. So I never took music, but my school teacher learned that I could sing, and just a little before I came up here, I told you, you met Mr. Allen. Guess what I sang to him for his birthday? You Are My Sunshine.
Oh my gosh, that is one of my favorite songs. Would you mind, would it be possible to sing a little bit of You Are My Sunshine for us? Oh, only if you're willing.
So I learned that as a skill, and my teacher, I guess she may have seen the difference that my mother was making with all of us. So she picked me out, and every play that she would have me to sing that, and
You Are My
you
Sunshine.
and your husband witnessed the program, the Teacher's Day program, right? What did I sing? You remember?
I can't remember, but you sung. I do remember what did you say?
God bless America,
God bless America.
land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with light from above, from the mountains, through the prairies, through the ocean, white with foam. Got to change your note. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Thank you, that was lovely. Thank
I
the ensemble as well.
sang that when they gave me this last award, and you just got to come to my house and see this last award. It's glass. Never had one from glass.
It's beautiful.
And so this teacher would, anytime she had a play, she would always have me singing. And my mother was very religious. My daddy was a superintendent of Sunday school. If my daddy had lived, I believe he could have matched any principal or superintendent's test with his knowledge, because he could do geometry, and he could play a piano, and he knew music. So I am very proud of my mother and my father. And back then we had, I don't want to talk too loud, we had a newspaper that had everything in it but the truth. And my daddy would buy this newspaper, and he loved the commercial appeal. And once a week, Daddy would buy this paper, and he would have us to read them by the lamplight. And we would play games and things like that. And people ask me now, why do you look for the news and all of those things? But I was taught that. And I'm very, very, very proud. And my two brothers were called to minister when they were 16 and 17 years old. They both were ordained ministers, and they both were pastoring a church when they died. Now, you through with me?
No, ma'am. I'd like to ask you a little bit more about your education. We stopped at 7th grade. You take me through from 7th grade to high school. How far did you go in school? Did you finish all the way to 12th?
Now let me tell you this.
Okay.
My older brother married, and he moved out of our county to Monroe County. And the people that he rented from rented houses, and that man owned a store. And my brother never did neither one of my brothers were light skinned, and they would get sunburnt and all if you send them to the field. So Mom always found something else for them to do. Okay, now my mother raised guineas, geese, ducks, chickens. she put those chickens up, and somehow or another she knew when the feathers was coming out. She picked them twice a year and made the mattresses. Put those mattresses up on top of the hen house and let them dry out, and you had your feather tea. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so my brother came, at that time, you know, my sisters, they were teenagers and all, and by the way, I had two sisters that died at 16 and 17. Mm. They had a fever. Mm. I don't know whether they had the same fever that my brother died from, but my brother told Mama, said, now, ain't nobody at home but her, and we got out at school at different times. They were in the big school, and I was at a little school. And so he told Mama, he said, Mama, said, my wife, said, we've been trying to get a baby a long time, so we don't have nobody. I said, he called me little sister. He said, would you let little sister go with me and stay with me and say she could learn different skills and things. But that man that owned that store, said he hires her every day. So she know how to cut meat and do everything. My daddy taught, you put a ham up here on this table, I can tell you, I can cut you some ham pieces and they want on script, you know, on script. You know how to cut a ham?
No, ma'am.
You? Okay.
Not properly. I'll saw it until I get the part I want on my sandwich.
I could give you a piece of round ham and you'd eat it in a minute. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. And so I started to living with my brother and his wife in Brinkley. Mm-hmm. And when I got to I was going to be promoted to the 8th grade, but when I got to that, he had been getting me so much. Mama said, well, next time you come over here, I'm just going to let you keep her. Said, because she had to go to the field by herself, and first one thing, though, said, I tell you what, said, I believe I'm just going to write her off to you. And now I was my daddy's only child. Mm-hmm. But he reared us to never say stepfather. He reared us to say, that's my brother and that's my sister. Mm-hmm. And so he was a good father. Mm-hmm. And some of them, they may not be living now, but they loved my daddy. Mm-hmm. And that's how I got from Trenton Elementary School, and I moved with my brother, and I stayed with him until he died. I stayed 4 years. Mm-hmm. And I would come home when the school was out, and my father always farmed, and I guess he was maybe the first black man that had a John Deere tractor. Mm. And I said that poem to you, mule, plow, hoe, and a sow, 24 hens and a rooster, you love like you used to. Mm-hmm. And this was the CWR Academy in Brinkley. Okay. And I completed there, top of my class. Mm-hmm. And I sang the class song.
Was that from 8th to 12th grade all the way through? Mm-hmm. Did you go to that school in Brinkley from, you promoted to 8th grade, did you do 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th there as well? Yes. Wonderful. And top of your class, valedictorian, the top of the class.
Yes. I have my graduation picture. Mm-hmm.
You are here today because of all of your excellent achievements, with the presidential, and we'll read some of those into the record before we finish the interview. I'd like to ask you, though, how did you become such a prosperous landowner? How was it? How did you become such a prosperous landowner?
Okay. I told you about my skills in school, but I never did tell you that I always did love a dollar. We never worked for no white man. The other kids going to school would have to work on white people's places, and they couldn't come to school at any time. But my daddy sent us to school. He wouldn't keep us from school to work on the field because he was the manager, and he kept those white people's farm clean. And I noticed that. And when these home demonstration club people would come, they would offer us skills. And they would tell us about, you stay in school and you get your education and you will get hired. And from that on, we had one of my teachers. Now, I had more than one teacher those years that I was in in the school at Trenton because my doctor married a teacher, and she was a home demonstration club woman. She was half white, and he died, and he left her a farm, and he left my daddy a piece of land. My grandfather that I was telling you about, he left each one of his granddaughters 20 acres, and my mother would always tell Daddy, even if we got to plow that with a mule, I'm gonna keep that land in my family, and it's still there. My grandson rents it out to a white man.
So you lease land to others. You lease your land to other people.
No, wait a minute now. Hold it. Don't go any further.
Okay.
I had a baby when I was in high school, my last years. Okay? And I made up in my mind that I would not have but that one baby. So I know what it took to get that baby. And I was tight. I said I would not have another sex until I married. I didn't. And when I had my baby, I brought my baby home. My mother always wanted me to go to school and be somebody. All the rest of them, they were courting and having babies, the first one thing, no, not. I know I promised the Lord a many times I wouldn't have but that one baby, and I still haven't got but that one child. But when I got to Brinkley, before I got to Brinkley, we had a black lady, this doctor's wife. She had a store. She had a store, and she hired me to work in this store when I would come home. And she had an old lady that lived with her, and I always did love older people. I would cut that toenail, they'd be stinking so bad, it would be pitiful. I'd go out there, put me some water around the pot, get me a pan, and put them old ladies' feet over in there and cut their nails, and they'd give me $25 or $1. Sometimes they'd give me a sack. I love peanut butter. Sometimes they'd give me some peanut butter. That was my pay. But this lady that had this store had an old lady that worked for her, and she hired me to keep this lady while she was a home demonstration club lady, and her husband was a doctor, but someone poisoned him. So she stayed a single lady for a good while. And I learned meat cutting and all of those things and working in Brinkley. And when she built this store up from the bottom up, he had money. Dr. Davis had a farm. It's called Thunderstruck. You're gonna see that in your computer. Thunderstruck. And I started saving my money, and I said that what I want, I'm gonna educate my child, and he and I would probably go to school together and all those things. And I came home I believe it was one winter. Yeah, my baby was born the 12th of December. And my mother, and at that particular time, and Lenora and I go back, I'm not near old as, you're not near as old as me. But you know some of the things that I'm talking about. Back when we were girls, if you got pregnant, you had to go to church and take your baby with you and stand up and say, I have sinned, and I want to become a member of this church, and I want my baby to be raised in this church. And the preacher would take you back in. You had sinned. And I kept wondering, well, now I sinned, that boy sinned too. How come they didn't call him in?
Oh, really?
I wrote my pastor a letter, and I told him that I had this baby, but I didn't feel it was right for him to say that I didn't belong to church, and this boy had sinned too. He said, well, he doesn't live here, so you haven't sinned. He just dropped it. But that stayed within me, and it's still within me now, because it takes two to get a baby.
Yes, ma'am.
And that boy needs some responsibility right now, and they're not taking it.
Did he ever take any responsibility or play a role in your son's life? The boy, did he ever accept any responsibility? Did he ever
I
get
wouldn't let
involved?
him. I wouldn't let him.
Would not
I
let him.
asked him not to come to my house anymore. And I told him that I would get on a, and I know you know this, back when we were kids, they didn't have welfare to help people out. If you had a mother or father, someone that couldn't work, had a disability, they would put them on the streets with a cup. And he'd sit on the street and shake this cup, and anybody passed by him, he would live off of that. And I told this man, he was a boy then, I would get on the street with me a cup and a stick and play blind before I let you help me with my baby. I did not want him to help me because I didn't want no parts of him. Sad story, but it's true.
Well, you still have your son and you know, who you are today. So what steps did you take in terms of either business or ownership? How did you become who you are now?
Okay, well, that's just what I'm telling you.
Okay.
The Sunday that I would come home every farming day, and I would chop cotton all the summer and help my mom and dad keep this farm, and I'd go back to Brinkley and work in the store, and we had to pay tuition then. You had to pay tuition, and this store, this school was owned by the Arkansas Baptists from Little Rock. And so my brother said, you need to start saving your money. I said, because you say you want to go to school. I said, that's right. He said, well, tell Mama you're not coming back no more to chop cotton because she don't never give you no money. And I'm going to keep you over here. So I started saving my money. And I bought me a big old trunk, and I started buying things and saving up things. And this particular Sunday, I had my baby. And my sister-in-law that I told you that my brother married, he got killed. She married another man. This man asked me, said, "Is the father of the child?" Or I kept good little practices. And I told him, I said, I would like for you. And at that time, Brinkley didn't have a hospital. Forest City had hospital. And I said, I would like to pay you to take me to the doctor when I get in labor. I had a sister from St. Louis, and she was going to come and stay with me. I always did plan. I planned to come up here today. Planned to bring you all some food. Okay. So he said, Andrew, my brother-in-law was real nice to me. He said, Andrew, he said, I will take you to the doctor. And he said, his wife was named Willie. He said, Willie thinks you are her daughter. And the way he said, I'll take her. I had my suitcase packed. We got in labor, went to Forest City, had my baby, stayed in the hospital 3 or 4 days, came home, and my brother told me, he said, I got your baby bed, and I got your cart, and I got your buggy. And I got a picture on my wall right now where I crocheted it for my baby. And at that particular time, there was a widowed man named Mr. Cleve Zachary. He saw me at church, and this wasn't his church, but he had a wife that belonged to this church. She died of cancer. And I have a cousin say that when he brought Mr. Cleve to our church to pick up his wife, so he said, if I ever get to be a widow, I will marry that gal there. And I was preparing to go to school in Texas, go finish my, I went to Homer Phillips Nursing School after I finished high school. And he said, Mr. Cleve told him, said, just watch me. So, and I have the suit that I married in, I have the suit that I had on when he fell in love with me. And he says, my cousin's name was Leroy, and Mr. Cleve didn't drive too much, but he had all kinds of tractors, over 1,000 acres of land, maybe more than 1,000, because I still have 1,000. So my dad asked me, he said, were you expecting, I hadn't dated no man now. My daddy said, was you expecting somebody? I said, no. I said, I wasn't expecting nobody. He said, well, there's somebody driving up out there. And he asked my mother, he said, Carol, are you expecting? And he said, well, Aunt Ruth, you go on in. Well, we would always, I don't know about your people, my mother would cook her dinner on a Saturday. Okay? He said, Aunt Ruth, you go in and warm up dinner. He said, I'll go out here and see who this is. And I heard my daddy say, you all come on in. And I said, Daddy, who is it? He said, well, one of them is your cousin Leroy. I said, but I don't know who this other man is. My father knew Mr. Cleve. Mr. Cleve had to put on a suit. Yeah. So he says, how are you doing, Mr. Cleve? And I said, that's Mr. Cleve, Zachary? Wonder what he brought Daddy some saws or something? Couldn't figure it out. We had a fireplace, didn't have no living room, didn't have no living room furniture. Just sat around the fire. So I walked in and I spoke to them. And Mr. Cleve said he fell in love with me. I had on a pink suit. And he said, he told Leroy, say, if I live, I'm gonna marry that woman. And my baby was crawling at that time, and my baby crawled up on his leg, and he took it. And he said he always did want a boy. He had one daughter, and she was old as he was, just about. And he said, Cleve said, this we named him Cleve. Said, Cleve got up in his lap. He said, he looked at him, said, I'm gonna be your daddy one of these days. I'm gonna be your daddy. So I sat down, and he says, you going to school somewhere? I said, yes, sir. I said, I'm registered in Texas, and I'm going and finish my nursing. My nursing superintendent committed suicide. Yeah, she committed suicide. And I had to come home from St. Louis and help my sister with the store, and that's when she met this man. Okay, and I decided that my mother wanted this boy. She had to raise her boy, and I'm gonna have me a boy, I'm gonna have my, I said, no ma'am, I'm not gonna let you have my baby. I said, I'm gonna go to college and I'm gonna have my baby with me, and I'm going to school and I'm gonna educate him right along with me. Mama, I hope you know better than that. No ma'am, you're not taking this baby with me. I said to myself, you got no plan, lady. Mm-hmm. Okay, I went on. Mr. Cleve called me. He asked me, he said, you Annie? I said, yes, I am. He says, I came down there to see you, but I lost I think he said nerve or something. He said, call your cousin Leroy and ask him, how did I lose my nerve? So I called Leroy. Leroy said, well, I just tell you, cuz. He said, he gonna marry you. I said, what? I said, that old man. I said, I don't know. I'm going to school. Okay. Next Sunday, he's back again. Okay. He said, and you say you going to school? I said, yes, sir, to him. I said, yes, sir. Vic's sitting in his lap now. Mm-hmm. No hugging and kissing. He said, well, what if I would tell you that I have chosen you for my wife? I said, what you say? And my mama's, she pissed for, no, sir. No, sir. I want my baby to finish school. She made a mistake, but she has come out of that. And he looked at her and he said, what if I tell you I can change your mind? 2,000 or 3,000 acres of land. He came back the next Sunday, and Mama had a room that she didn't use. She just asked company in. So she said, well, if he called himself courting you, he need to tell me something, because I tell you what, I'm not going to let you and neither my baby go nowhere with him, because he's too old. I didn't say nothing, but I had my mind on what I wanted to. I wanted a daddy for my baby. Mm-hmm. And I wanted my baby to be an inheritor. Mm. Now God knows that was in my mind. But I did not want to marry a man that I didn't love. So I asked the Lord to show me who my husband was. Next Sunday, he came back. He said, well, I tell you one thing. He said, I have a farm. He said, and it's just been kind of going to the dog since, he said, Mary was my bookkeeper. He said, and I keep some bad. He said, I write my weights on brown paper or anything. He said, but I sure would like to have you for my wife. That was his proposal. I talked it over with my daddy. I was much closer to my daddy than I was my mother. And Daddy said, well, he said, do you think that you could make an old man a wife? I said, yes, Daddy. I said, I don't want Rufus, that was my baby's daddy. I said, I don't want him. I said, I want to finish up my schooling. I said, I will ask Mr. Cleve and all these things. January 13th, we married.
That's wonderful. I would like at this time to read a short section of some of your achievements. And then after I read that, I'd like to give my colleagues an opportunity, if they have some questions they'd like to ask you for our interview as well. So this will give you a chance to just relax for a few moments while I do this. The life, career, and legacy of Annie Ruth Zachary Pike. Annie Pike is a native of Marvell, which is a small town in Phillips County, Arkansas. She was born in 1931 in the small town of Big Creek, not far from Marvell. Her father was a local farmer and landowner, which was not common for African Americans to own land during the times after the Elaine race massacre of 1919. In my interview with Annie Pike, and this is from Caitlin Petty, on November 13, 2018, that you, Ms. Pike, recall never being hungry and was blessed to never have to work as a sharecropper or tenant farmer. Her family raised their own meat and grew their own vegetables. During her school years, Annie was ambitious, was involved in many sports and clubs, and stated that she wanted to be the best at any opportunities that were offered to her. After graduating high school, she attended Homer G. Phillips Hospital School of Nursing in St. Louis, Missouri, and graduated there in 1952. Annie then moved back to her hometown of Marvell, where she married her first husband, Grover Zachary. He was also a farmer and landowner until he became ill. While managing the farm, she was also a nurse and mother. She took full advantage of the USDA's resources in order to achieve full agricultural success, along with other ways to benefit her farm. The interactions with the USDA influenced her to take part in rural civil rights activism. Annie was appointed to the USDA Citizens Advisory Committee on Civil Rights and was also appointed to the Arkansas Farmers Administration Advisory. At the same time as her involvement in agriculture, she became a key part of the Arkansas Republican Party. Through Winthrop Rockefeller's campaign in 1966, she helped him become the first Republican governor of Arkansas since 1874. Annie went door to door campaigning in Phillips County for Rockefeller, and this played a huge part in his 80% African-American votes. Rockefeller recognized her important contribution to his campaign and appointed her to the State Welfare Board. She became a leading figure in the Republican Party due to her concern for the needy. Annie served in the White House Conference on Aging, the Technical Committee on Nutrition, the United States Department of Agriculture, Citizens Advisory Commission on Civil Rights during the Nixon administration. The reason Annie ran for the state Senate as a Republican in 1972 was for the benefit of black farmers, but sadly she did not win. Running for a state Senate made her the first African-American woman to successfully file and run for an elected position in the 20th. After losing the race, she was still heavily involved with the Republican Party and politics, and inspired many African Americans to become active in state politics. The legacy of Annie Pike, created in public service, is difficult to rival. With those thoughts being added to the record, and I'd like to turn it over to one of my colleagues to ask some questions at this time. Ready?
One of the things before you start, one of the things you asked if you were leasing your land, and I don't think she heard you. She does rent her land out.
Huh? I was my own manager for over 20 years.
Well, maybe one of you can follow up on that issue.
That's
Is it-
fine.
And by the way, now that the two
And
years-
before, and Mr.
we get
I-
something from you to use this, or the interview, we won't be able to use it.
Okay,
I spent 20 years with Mr. Cleave.
Really?
Really?
I was one young woman that had an old man, and I loved him, and he loved me.
Wow.
And he left me what he had. He had one child, and his daughter and her family lived real well. They weren't good managers, but I guess they held maybe a little of the land he left them. But I thank God that I have had my ups and downs, and I had to go through 2 lawsuits to get my part of what Mr. Cleave left me, because I had good lawyers, and I saw to it that once Mr. Cleave married me, that I got him good lawyers, because if it hadn't been, he would have had everything taken from him by the other color, because he was friends to them and they were taking care of his business. And he told me that I could take care of it if I wanted to, but there were some things that I would have to do. Okay, let me finish, because you need to know that. Mm-hmm. He had 3 white plantation owners. Mr. Cleave had 27 tenants. And he had houses and a piece of land for every one of those tenants. Okay. Now, he had all of this land, and when I married him, he was using the mule and the plow. And I told you about the Home Demonstration Club people. I kept my membership up with the Home Demonstration Club people, and I did what they said to. Mr. Cleave had never had an acre of his land examined. And I started going, no, the women started asking me, since I knew how to crochet and all those things, why don't we set up some home demonstration clubs? We came there, and when you look on my record, you find out that they elected me to be the president of the Home Demonstration Club. And before you get through, you're going to find out that I also became president of the white and the blacks when we united in 1969. Okay, and Mr. Cleave suffered a stroke. We had, let me tell you where Victor got his name from. He was at Alexander. I gave him his rifle name, but one day we were in the back room there, and Mr. Cleave, I don't know whether he had the stroke or not, but Vic had married. Yeah, he had married, and Victor's wife was in the room with Mr. Cleave, and he said, he called her Miss Pat. He said, "How did you get to be down here with this boy?" And he said, "Now you know, Ruth gonna name your baby after me." She was about 7 or 8 months pregnant, and she said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, would you name a boy after me?" She said, "I don't know." Said, "My husband is outside." Said, and said, he might say no. He said, "Well, go ask him." And I said, "You had a baby. Would you name your baby after me?" Said, "Yeah." And he said, "My mother's name was, I told you, Amaryllis." Said, "If you have a girl, would you name her after me?" She said, "Well, what me and Vic gonna do? Yeah, our baby got a baby, and you name him after." And he said, "You do what I asked you to do, okay?" And when Mr. Cleave died, I had started, you haven't asked me anything about my political side of life. Okay, and I'm not gonna get into that because I worked for the Rockefellers for over 10 years. And I became Annie Rockefeller Pike. I worked for them, and you go to see somewhere there, several people said, I brought the Republican Party into Arkansas. Have you read that? Okay. You know, Mr. Edwards, the head of the water, he put that in the paper about Clark Hall and I. He said if it hadn't been for Annie Pike and Clark Hall, we would not have had a Marvell.
I think that's wonderful. I was just about to.
And I wanted to bring this up. Mr. Cleave suffered a real heart stroke because it hit him in his brain, and he never went to the hospital. But 2 weeks before he died, I looked after him. My nursing skills, I didn't complete registered nursing, but I completed enough to get an Arkansas license. And Mr. Cleave told me I would never nurse nobody but him for his part. He wanted me to nurse him. And I dropped that, and I tended to Mr. Cleave like I would have a baby. And I would do it all over again if I had to. And they said that when they started asking him, he had, these guys that was saying that they were taking his land, he didn't have a car. He bought me my first car and paid cash for it. And he said that they asked them, said, what y'all gonna do with my cotton? Oh, Cleve, we take care of it. Just bring it up here. Cleve he had 20-some families. All those families had children. And you could put them in a 20-acre place, and they would have to have a row apiece. That's how they pick cotton. And these men told Cleve, you don't have to go up there and pick up your samples and everything. We'll pick them up. He had 4. And they said they owned this land. Cleve said that every acre that he had it by working. And I have to tell the truth. I don't think he was paying them as much as they should have been paid, because I found that out and I changed that. Okay. And he said that he told this white man once that, I believe I let my wife, no, she just mad at you for your money, don't you? I keep on picking them up. You bring me some more. He kind of crippled. He'd walk in, had all them big samples. That's what you call it. Samples of cotton, take them to this man. Don't even count the sample. Take them to the other man. Take them to the man. IRS caught up with this. One day I was in the kitchen. Somebody knocks on the door. Said, you Annie? I said, yes, I am. Says, Cleve's your husband? I said, yes, he is. Say, well, we want to talk to you. You got time? I told him that he was in the field, but I would go get him if it was important. I got in this brand new Mercury. I got in my car, went out the field. Oh, no, I ain't studying them. They tell them I'm going. I said, Cleve, I said, no, the IRS. And I dealt with IRS with the stores. And I had to keep a record with the stores on the pounds and the people. Okay. They said, well, if you couldn't get him to come back, said, tell him he's on his way to the penitentiary if he doesn't watch his business. Say, and we have watched you and watched you kept Miss Arnold's store. And you were nothing but a 16-year-old girl. And her husband and her trusted that store with me. I would open the store and close it and lock the money up, and they had a safe. I learned a combination on the safe. Okay. Please say, well, tell them I'll be there tomorrow, but they better be there on time. Okay, he bossing. He was an SOB. Next day, I heard the knock on the door again, and Cleve had 4 men that stayed in little houses around his house I had to cook for. I had to get up and cook their breakfast and cook our breakfast, and we all ate together. And I heard you knock on the door, these two FBI men, IRS. Hello, how are you? I said, fine. They had those big old attache cases, and they had their folding table. They said, we'll sit out here on the porch until you all finish. Said, did you have any meat left for breakfast? I said, yes, I did. He said, well, could you just cook us a little piece of meat, a piece of bread? They came on in the house and ate. Mr. Cleve came up. They said, old man, I said, now, you know, we from a different country from you, and don't pay us no attention for calling you old man. That's what we just call people we honor. And we honor you because of what you own and how you got it. And the courthouse say that you bought it, and you took mortgages on their hogs, pigs, cows, women, or what. And you bought your land with that. And it shows that you bought it. So now you need to sit down and let us talk to you, sir. What y'all want to know? How many bales of cotton, how many acres of land you know? I don't know. I bought 600 from about 400 of those. Miss Dennis said, I got 1,000 over there. You don't know how much you got? No, so I really don't. Mr. Brickhill, he keeps it, and Mr. White, he keeps it. I said, okay. Say, we got you. Say, now, how do you pay them? I pay them by the week. Well, where is your books? He had a loft in the house, and he went and moved the little stairs and got that down. He came down with an arm of paper sacks. Now this here is this land right here. And I paid this here boy $40-something for what he did. I said, and that's the only record you got? Yes, sir, what you mean that's the only record I got? I don't keep no record, They said, okay. They drop it. Said, from this day forward, we got Annie Ruth. We've already checked her out. We checked her work out at the store. And we know she's honest. We know she's educated. And we have her on our side. We would love to have you on our side. And as long as you trust those 4 men, he called their name, because I try my best not to use their name too much because they have families. And I don't want to hurt none of their families. Because I got my part. You want me to hush?
No, thanks. I appreciate that. And we wanted to, acknowledge back from the beginning that we can't tell the whole story today, although the story that you're telling is captivating. And you've answered my question from the beginning, which was, how did you acquire so much? It was because of your personal experience and knowledge, and you met a man who had a life that provided your love together to turn into the empire you have now. He trusted you.
He was incompetent, and he couldn't write his name when he took sick. And he weighed one of those shells broke down. And he took sick. And I carried him to the doctor, and they started giving him therapy. And he weighed 200 and something. He came down from 200 to 145, and he had a hospital bed. And I waited on him, gave him his shots and everything, and he overcame it. And I waited on him for 11 years. I was married 20-some years. 11 years, I waited on him.
We had nursing training, agriculture training, financial training. So actually, he was lucky to find you.
I managed the farm for over 10 years, and I was renting it, and I had a bad reputation.
What, for being serious about business? That's not a bad reputation. That's good.
I didn't date nobody on the farm, I bet you.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
I would like to let these guys ask a few questions though before we
Okay.
end our interview.
Okay.
So you want to go first, and then we'll pass it this way. Okay, make sure you say who you are.
Okay. Now you talk loud enough now so I can hear you.
I'm Gabrielle Hurd, Gabrielle, and can you talk more about your bad reputation? I want to hear more about what made you such a strong businesswoman while running the farm.
Strong businesswoman?
Yeah.
Well, I think my training from my mother and father gave me a lot of it, and I give all of it to the Heavenly Father. But I never missed a Sunday school class. I never missed anything in Home Demonstration Club, and I became the president of the Home Demonstration Club in my community. Then I became the president in the county. And during that time, a guy named, I don't mind using his name now because he's dead and his family loves me too. And he came to one of my programs, and we were learning work skills at that program. When he got through, he said, Anna, he said, I know that your father is a deputy and he sees after this and he sees after the other. He said, but how would you, what party are you a member of? At that time, I was paying poll tax. I said, well, my daddy just come and get my poll taxes, and I pay them a year, and white folks was paying Mr. Cleve's taxes. I didn't have them. And I said, but I'm learning. And he said, all right. He said, well, how would you like to join the Republican Party? I said, well, I have never been anything else but a Democrat. He said, well, I want you to learn something. And I said, what you want me to learn? He said, I'm Bankston Waters. And he said, your husband gets all of his cotton seeds and gas and everything from me. And I would just like to train you. I said, well, I would love to. He said, but you never did tell me about your party affiliation. I said, all right then. I said, well, you come back to the house. I talked, never did anything but talk it over with my husband.
You have a follow-up question?
Yeah. So I think
He initiated me to join the Republican Party. And the Republican Party's headquarters was in Little Rock at that time. They invited me to come to Little Rock to a meeting. I was the only black in that meeting.
Let Donovan and these guys get one in. Thank you.
What year was that, by the way?
I'll tell you in a minute. You go ahead and talk loud now.
Yes, ma'am. My question is about, you mentioned how someone in your family wanted the land that you have to remain in the family.
What now?
How someone in your family wanted the land that you own to remain in the family. And what challenges or what's been hard about doing that? Have people tried to come and buy your land from you? What challenges have you faced in keeping your land in the family?
What you're asking me is how was I treated by my family members?
Or people outside of your family too?
Well, when Mr. Cleve made his will out, when Mr. Cleve made his will out, and we had four lawyers, 2 bakers, and 2 black men, and both of them were businessmen. And they said that, and now they would come, and I had no part of what he put in his will. They would come and pick him up. And of course he was crippled, and you would have to see him use the bathroom, but he didn't use it. He wasn't incompetent. And they would come and get him, and sometimes they'd stay all day. And one of these guys was a banker. And he said when they got ready to make the will out, so they told him, said, now, we're here to save you. Said, now Ruth has saved you up until now. Then these FBI men and IRS men said, they recommended your wife. Said, and you better start listening to her. Said, but we want you to tell us how you want to distribute your land. I want Ruth to have all of it. I ain't giving them some of the bitches nothing. That's what he used. And said, So the man said, well, why do you feel that way? So he said, I never had a suit of clothes, and I never had a car until I married Ruth. Said, but I married Ruth and I bought her a car, and she would carry me to the doctor every time in that car. Said, and when I got down sick, I didn't belong to nobody's church. Said, but she carried me to church and got me baptized. Said, now I'm a Christian. Said, and I would give her more if I had it. Said, I want you to read me off what I got. And they said, they read it off. So they said, I ain't giving my grandchildren nothing. Said, and the lawyer that was sitting there told him, said, well, now that's not Arkansas law. That you have to, by law, once you own as much, you have to leave every one of them something. There you go. And now they turned around. They never came to see him when he was sick or nothing. But they turned around and sued me after he died. He was sick in the bed. Okay.
I think earlier you said that the young generation is weak.
That what?
The young generation is weak. What's one piece of advice you would give to yourself when you were younger?
What?
She's saying you described earlier that the young generation you said was weak. And she's looking for you to give her some tips or response on for young people now, and also if you could go back and talk to yourself when you were younger, what advice would you give yourself?
You mean, why am I like I am? My mother and father were very strict. And like I said, I never worked on a white man's place. I never lived in a white man's house. But my mother would always have something for us to do. She taught the girls crochet. And she taught us, do y'all know anything about drying fruit? Mm-hmm. My dad had an orchard out of this world. And he would sell pears, and I didn't tell you this, Mr. Cleve would grow gardens, 20 and 30 acres, and sell it to the tenants on the place. Mm. And I would help them make lard, I would help them can, and I learned from Home Demonstration Club to sell a mother that's got 10 children, a bushel of peaches. She would come to my house and I would teach her how to can it.
Ms. Pike, you have such an incredible depth of knowledge, an incredible realm of experiences, an incredible life that started from beginnings that no one would believe that your life would have turned into what it did now, to have that wonderful marriage, to have your son, to have connections with the Republican Party, to have helped build Arkansas to where it is because of your connections, your Hall of Fame recommendations, all the things we talked about before. It is truly an honor, and I just feel horrible having to conclude the interview at this time. We would love to be able to speak to you another time with your permission to talk more about these things. But at this time, on behalf of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, I'd like to conclude the interview with thanks to you for your giving, for your knowledge, for your love, for your care, and just knowing us. And thank you so much, and give you the final privilege to have whatever comments that you would like to have. And then when you conclude those comments, that will conclude this interview with our immense thanks.
Now they're doing a book on my life at Arkansas University in Jonesboro. Dr. Sharice Branch Jones, do you know her? She's the dean now. She's from Carolina, North Carolina. And she met me in Little Rock the other day when I went over there, because I sure wanted you to go. Okay. Okay. What else?
So whatever, when you decide to stop talking to us, that'll be it.
Well, let's have prayer.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Father in heaven, I come as humble as I know how. Thanking you, dear God. I thank you, dear God, for this moment. I thank you, dear God, for everything that you've done for me from the time of my conception until this present moment where I have met with others. I ask of your grace and your mercy. And I ask you, Lord, to show me the way. Anything that I'm doing wrong, charge it, Father. To my not knowing, I want to learn to live with you when I die. And I ask of you, Father, to bless my son as he strives to do this will and trying to feed the people. And Lord, give me strength to help him in any way that I can. Show me the way, Lord. And I ask of you, Father, to help each one of these people here to know that they must know you before they get to heaven, individually and collectively. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Oh, I got tears.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's profound.
Play the middle or the top?
That was nice.